She was rocking the stroller when a dirty, emaciated cat suddenly lunged straight at her baby. Mary screamed, her heart clenching in terror. Was it attacking? But a second later, she realized the cat was trying to save the baby from something she hadn't even noticed. And what happened next shocked everyone around. The park was full of life. Warm rays of sunlight gently settled on the green grass, while a light spring breeze carried the freshness of blooming flowers. Elderly couples sat on benches, lazily chatting and tossing crumbs to the pigeons that strolled leisurely across the pavement, hoping for a treat. From the playground came the cheerful laughter of children. They eagerly slid down the slides, built sandcastles, and chattered with each other in their sweet, slightly funny voices. Mary sat on a bench in the shade of a sprawling maple tree. She gently rocked the stroller, where her 6-month-old son, Liam, slept peacefully. Watching him, she felt a deep warmth spread inside her. Everything was just as it should be. Safe. Cozy. But this moment of peace was suddenly interrupted. Somewhere behind her, a sharp rustling sound broke through the air, as if something had forcefully pushed through the bushes. The noise was so sudden and loud that a chill ran down Mary's spine. Her fingers instinctively tightened around the stroller's handle, and her eyes darted toward the source of the sound. A second later, a thin, dirty cat burst out of the thick bushes. It was running straight toward her. No, not just toward her. Toward Liam. Mary gasped. Her heart pounded in her chest, and a cold knot of fear tightened in her stomach. Her body reacted before her mind could process the situation. She lunged forward to shield the stroller, to push the attacker away. The cat leaped onto the stroller. Adrenaline surged through Mary, and the world blurred before her eyes. She was ready to shove the animal aside, but suddenly her hand froze in midair. Something was wrong. The cat wasn't growling, wasn't baring its claws, wasn't trying to scratch Liam. Instead, it clung to the baby's blanket, yanking it with all its might. "Hey!" The word burst from her lips, but the cat ignored her completely. It kept pulling at the fabric, meowing loudly and desperately as if it were in a panic, as if it was trying to say something. People began to turn around. The noise, the shouting, and the cat's unusual behavior had drawn the attention of passers-by. Within seconds, a small crowd had gathered around the stroller, mothers with children, elderly couples, and random bystanders. "What's going on?" a worried voice asked. "What's wrong with the cat? Why is it acting like that?" "Maybe it's rabid? Someone should scare it away." A well-built man stepped forward, raising his hand, ready to push the cat away. But Mary, still shaken but beginning to understand that something was seriously wrong, quickly raised her palm. "Don't touch him," the cat growled. A low, desperate sound, filled with a strange urgency no one expected. Its back arched, fur bristling, and claws dug deep into the blanket. It pulled at the fabric with force, as if trying to rip it away. And that's when Mary saw it. Her blood ran cold. Liam's little face had turned pale, too pale. His lips, God, they were turning blue. His tiny eyelashes fluttered, his delicate fingers twitched weakly, and then went still. He wasn't breathing. Oh my God! The scream tore from her lips as she lunged for the stroller. Her heart pounded so wildly it drowned out all other sounds around her. Her hands trembled as she scooped Liam up. He felt so light, too light, and his tiny chest rose and fell in weak, jerky spasms as if he was trying desperately to take a breath but couldn't. "He's choking. He's not breathing." Panic crashed over her like a tidal wave. Her ears rang, the world blurred. Someone screamed. Someone fumbled with their phone, calling an ambulance. Mary knew she couldn't afford to lose a single second. Do something! Hurry!" She flipped Liam over, tilting him downward to help clear his airway, patting his back firmly, but nothing happened. "No, no, no, no!" The crowd was spiraling into chaos. Some tried to shout advice, others simply stood frozen in horror. And then, the cat let out a loud, drawn-out yowl and suddenly scratched her hand, as if trying to tell her something. Mary's eyes snapped downward, and that's when she saw it. A tiny corner of the blanket was pressed against Liam's lips, almost invisible, but his saliva had darkened the fabric slightly. He was choking. Oh, God. A fresh wave of terror swept through her, but with it came a spark of realization. She could still save him. Mary knew she had only seconds. Her hands trembled, but she couldn't afford a mistake. She took a deep breath, forcing down the panic, and gently pried open Liam's tiny mouth. It was dark inside, but through the shadows, she could see it. A small, barely visible piece of fabric lodged deep in his throat. God, if she did this wrong, if he inhaled any deeper. Clenching her teeth, she slowly, very slowly slid her fingers inside, searching for the dangerous obstruction. Her own breath hitched. His skin was too cold, too still. "It's okay, sweetheart. Mommy's here," she whispered, though her voice was shaking. Her nails grazed the fabric. Almost, just a little more. Her entire body tensed with concentration. "Come on," she pleaded under her breath, and with painstaking care, she pulled. For several agonizing seconds, seconds that stretched into eternity, the fabric refused to budge. And then, all at once, it came loose. In the very next heartbeat, Liam gasped for air. His little body jolted, shuddering violently. A few seconds of pure, breathless silence. And then, he let out a wail, loud, piercing, alive. It was the most beautiful sound Mary had ever heard. She nearly collapsed to her knees. Her chest rose and fell in ragged sobs, hot tears streaking down her cheeks as she clutched her son to her chest, rocking him, stroking his little head, feeling his warm breath against her skin. My baby. My precious baby. Around her, relieved sighs rippled through the crowd. Someone even started clapping, while a few women wiped away tears. But then, Mary's gaze snapped back to the man who had, just moments ago, raised a hand to strike the cat. A surge of anger shot through her like white-hot steel. She stood up, cradling Liam tightly against her. Her voice was raw but steady. "You were going to hit him!" The man froze. "That cat saved my child." His lips parted, but no words came out. Shame flickered in his eyes. "Damn," someone muttered in the crowd. "Unbelievable," another whispered. People now looked at the stray cat with a new kind of respect. The cat, as if sensing that his mission was complete, sank onto the ground, exhausted. Filthy, emaciated, he curled up into a small ball, and a soft, heavy purr rumbled from his chest. As if he knew he had done something that truly mattered, Mary slowly sank to her knees beside the animal. Her legs trembled, her heart still pounded somewhere in her throat. Her palms were sticky with sweat, and her chest felt heavy. A weight of fear, shock, and relief all crashing over her at once. The cat lay before her, tired, filthy, and exhausted. But his eyes met hers. Those eyes. There was no wildness of a stray in them, no hostility, no anger, no distrust, only quiet understanding, as if he knew exactly what had just happened, as if he understood that he had just saved a tiny life. His fur was rough, matted, and clumped together with dirt. Beneath his thin skin, his bones were sharply visible. He hadn't eaten in days, maybe even weeks. His tail twitched slightly, but when Mary gently reached out and touched his head, He didn't flinch. He just watched her. Her eyes burned with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. Her voice broke, but she didn't try to hide her emotions. How could she? She stroked him, hesitantly at first, then with more confidence. Her fingers sank into his tangled fur, and he didn't resist. He simply rubbed his head against her palm, then closed his eyes and began to purr. The sound was weak, uneven, but real. And Mary couldn't hold it in anymore. A choked, broken sob tore from her chest. She cried for the fear that still clung to her, for the overwhelming relief that hit her too fast, for the gratitude, so deep and pure that, for a moment, she forgot how to breathe. This stray, lost cat had saved her son. Mary sat in the quiet of her home, listening to the steady breathing of Liam. He slept peacefully in his crib, wrapped snugly in a new blanket, his tiny fingers relaxed. He was safe. And in the kitchen, under the warm glow of the lamp, the cat purred softly. Before him sat a bowl of food, real, fresh food, not the scraps he had been forced to scavenge on the streets. He ate slowly, carefully, like an animal that wasn't used to being given food freely. Mary watched him, feeling something she couldn't quite put into words. Fate, a miracle, gratitude. "Oscar," she murmured. The cat lifted his head. His ears twitched slightly before he returned to his meal. He was no longer alone, and though he had been astray, though he had spent his life hungry and cold, now he was their guardian angel.